Today we're going to be looking at factoring a quadratic trinomial where a is not 1. So if we look back to what we remember quadratic trinomials to be, we will have ax squared plus bx plus c. And in our x puzzle, here we are going to look for a number that multiplies to ac and adds up to b. And those two numbers go in this spot here. And what we do, this is the difference from when a does equal 1. What we do is we put those two numbers in this spot, in that spot. So we've split our b term into the sum of those two numbers. So let's see how this works. So here we have 2x squared plus 7x plus 3. So we want two numbers that multiply to 6 and add up to 7. I don't want that in orange, I want that in green. 7. There we go. Okay, so what are those two numbers? Those numbers are 6 and 1. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put the 1x over there and the 6x over here because I know the 6x and the 3 will have something in common, but it really doesn't matter. You can mix them around. So if some of you have done it the other way, that's perfectly fine. You will eventually get to the same answer. Okay, so from here, we need to factor by grouping. So we wanted two numbers that multiplied to 6 and added up to 7. And we have split the middle. That's this step over here. So we can think of this as like our first step. This is our second step. So we split the middle. And now comes to our third step, which is factor by grouping. So if we look at the first two terms, we have 2x squared and x. Common factor between those two terms is x. And the common factor between 6x and 3 is 3. So we will factor from the first two terms, factor out that x, leaving us with 2x plus 1. And then we have a plus sign, so that operation comes down. And now we're going to factor out the 3. So now we have 2x plus 1. And now we can see that 2x plus 1 is common. So we can see we have 2x plus 1 and 2x plus 1. So we know 2x plus 1 is common. So now we factor out the bracket. And inside we will have x plus 3. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Here we're looking for two numbers that multiply to 12 and add up to negative 7. So those two numbers are going to be negative 3 and negative 4. So we're going to split the middle. So minus 4x and minus 3x plus 6. From our first two terms, we can see we have 2x is common. And in the next two terms, we have 3 is common. You don't need to write those little numbers at the bottom. I'm doing that so for those of you who need help seeing it, you can see it. But if you don't need it and you can already see it, then you can go straight down and just do your factor by grouping. And then when we factor out the 2x, we will have x minus 2. Then we have that minus sign, subtraction. And then when we factor out the 3, we will have x, because remember, in the original term, this is like negative 3x. So, and here, because of the subtraction, it's like I'm factoring out a negative 3. So we'll have x minus 2. So then our bracket is common, so factor that out. And there we go. Okay, let's do this example now. We are looking for two numbers that multiply to negative 6 and add up to negative 5. This is going to give us an opposite sign. Remember, because if we multiply to a negative, we're going to have opposite sign. And here, it's a positive 1 and negative 6. So 2x squared plus 1x minus 6x minus 3. So here our common factor is x, and here the common factor is 3. So we take x, open your bracket, 2x plus 1. Our operation is subtraction. Factor out your 3, which is actually factoring a negative 3. And so now we will have 2x plus 1. So again, common factor, 2x plus 1, leaving us with x minus 3. Okay, let's do one more example. And when we're looking at this example, we need to remember what we had to do in our previous notes when we had factoring a simple quadratic. And if we have a negative in our first term, so remember when it's in standard form, in your first term, if you have a negative, you must factor out that negative, right? So if a is less than 0, then we factor out the negative. And we always have to remember to factor out our highest common or greatest common factor. So here, before we go to our x puzzle, we factor out the negative. There's no other common factor, so we're just going to factor out that negative. And now we want two numbers that multiply to negative 90 and add up to 1. And those two numbers, we know again we're multiplying to a negative, so we're going to have one positive, one negative number. And because our sum is positive, then we know that the bigger number has to be a positive. So we're actually going to have positive 10 and negative 9. So very important to remember that negative that's outside can't go anywhere. And now we split And we have here a common factor of 3x. And here our common factor is 5. Again, remember that negative has to stay there. And because we're going to have nested brackets, I'm actually just going to, for now, put my outside brackets as square brackets, just so that it's easier to see the difference. And now we will have 2x minus 3. We have a plus. And then again, 2x minus 3. Close those square brackets. In the next step, my square brackets are going to go away, because now I have my negative. I put my common bracket. And then I have 3x plus 5. So let's write down the steps that we have done. So the first step is actually factor out any negatives or GCFs, right? So I'm actually going to leave that, because that's more of what we're going to do just as a if they are. But in general, once we get to the actual quadratic that we want to factor, the first step is going to be complete the square. Complete the X puzzle, excuse me. And then the second step is what we call split the middle. And your third step is then factor by grouping. And in your notes, I want you to somehow have that reminder for yourself that you are going to keep that in mind, right? Because those things we will do first before we can get to the quadratic that we will actually factor. Okay, so what you're going to do now is you are going to, on a page, follow the steps to do question 1 of the exercises, and then you will bring that to my desk to check.